people have conflicts and they'd really like to see what is said this evening. So we're recording it so that others can view this later. So if you all have friends who aren't able to join us this evening and would like to view the presentation, we'll be sending out that link. We would ask that everyone except Representative Deweese and Senator Boyd, if you all would please stay muted, just because it will be chaos if we're all trying to talk at the same time. And if you have questions, if you would please put them in the chat, we will try to get to all of them. I will probably group questions, similar questions, so that we don't ask the same ones over and over again. So with that, I'm going to start by introducing our speakers and asking them to make some opening remarks, and then we'll get to the questions. I'm going to start with Senator Nicole Boyd. Senator Boyd is a graduate of Mississippi State University and the University of Mississippi School of Law. She lives in Oxford and is a member of Panola Partnership and the Oxford Chamber of Commerce. Elected to the State Senate in 2020, Senator Boyd is Vice Chair of the Universities and Colleges Committee, and she serves on the Education Committee in addition to Finance, Housing, Insurance, Judiciary A, Technology, Tourism, and the Legislative Budget Committees. Senator Boyd, I'll turn it over to you to make some opening remarks.
I just want to thank y'all for having us here today. I'm glad to be here with my counterpart from Oxford. We ran the same first year, and we both have a huge love and interest in moving our state forward in education. And so I cannot thank you enough for being here, but also for you taking the time tonight to be on this conference call and to be talking about something that we think is very important for the change in this state. So I thank y'all for being here, and I look forward to kind of hearing your questions. And afterwards, if you want to engage further, please contact me. I would love to talk to you further. So thank y'all.
Great, thank you. And Representative Clay Deweese is a native of Clarksdale, and he is a graduate of the University of Mississippi and currently resides in Oxford. Representative Deweese was elected to the State Senate in 2020, and he too serves on the Education Committee, in addition to Banking and Financial Services, Insurance, Judiciary A, Judiciary and Bank, Tourism, and Universities and Colleges Committee. Representative Deweese, would you like to make some remarks?
Sure. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for having us. And to kind of expound on what Nicole said, we did run this election the same cycle, and are learning as we go. And it's such a privilege to be serving on the Education Committee. It is obviously near and dear to our hearts, and something that we're proud to work on. Having educators in my family, I'm not one. I'm in the business field. But I am the husband to a special education teacher, so it's obviously something that's very important to me and to my wife Katie, and have worked with her through this and working alongside Senator Boyd. It is certainly nice knowing that the counterpart on the other end of the hallway, we're pulling the rope in the same direction. So thank you for having us, and we look forward to answering all the questions we can.
Terrific, thank you. Well, why don't we start by having you explain your dyslexia legislation? So each of you has introduced a bill, a dyslexia bill. So why don't you explain your legislation and tell us why it's important?
Clay, you want to start?
You go ahead, ladies first. You do a lot better than explaining this. Let me say that they are companion bills. My side was House Bill 754, and the Senate bill was 2307.
Thank y'all so much for, again, so the legislation, what we looked at the dyslexia issue. We had a number of constituents in our district that approached us about this issue, and it was an issue I was familiar with. I've been a special education advocate. I've taught special education law, and this is an issue that has come up for a number of years. And there is a mistaken perception out there that IDEA does not cover dyslexia. In fact, that issue came up on a conference call I believe y'all had with Governor Hosemann back in maybe September. One of the callers, or one of the questions, was about that particular issue. And we have seen that come up with school districts across the state. So Senator Deweese, Representative Deweese and I started working with the Department of Education, and we give tremendous credit to Robin Lamotis, who is the Special Education Director at the Department of Education. She has worked with us lockstep. And this is a first step, is what I'm going to tell you. So some of y'all have said, why didn't y'all do this? Why didn't you do that? This is a first step. And the first step is making sure that our school districts are treating this as an issue that should be evaluated for special education under IDEA, and the federal law requires that. This is considered a specific learning disability, and specific learning disabilities are one of the 13 categories under IDEA. And if it doesn't qualify for special education services under IDEA, then they should be evaluated for a 504. And so there was language in when they passed the dyslexia legislation a number of years ago. This section was codified in kind of a strange place. And it was codified in a manner that it made it confusing to our school districts as well. So what we did is we rewrote those sections, and we pulled that out of one of the sections that was talking about a dyslexia scholarship bill, and we put it in its own separate code section so that therefore school districts know unequivocally that a child that has a dyslexia diagnosis needs to be evaluated under IDEA. Now, whether a child their dyslexia is severe enough to qualify for that or not is a determination that has to be made by that IEP evaluation team. If they don't qualify for that, then we have put in the legislation that they needed to be evaluated for a 504 plan. That is under another federal law that's under the Rehabilitation Act. And so under that federal law, children are allowed accommodations such as extra time on tests, allowed to have those tests printed in a font that is conducive to children with dyslexia. It makes it easier for them to read. And so there's a number of accommodations that are available to families and to children who have dyslexia under that. So what we did is this is kind of a first step that we've taken. And the original bill, both of our original bills had in it a training component. And that has been taken out. It was a mandatory training component that would have asked people every 3 years to take a 2-hour training course on dyslexia. And we were going to make that available for all education professionals because, you know, it's our belief too that there's a lot of children that have fallen through the crack that have dyslexia in the school systems. And so the training modules, the department is still going to offer this, even though it may not be in the legislation. They are going to offer to do the training on this piece. And so it will be a training that, for instance, if you're the high school geometry teacher and you have a child that they're not quite getting geometry and there's something that you think might possibly wrong, there would be a kind of a module that you could look at dyscalculia and see if maybe a child has some issues in regards to that. Because we know that these learning issues are very interchangeable, whether it be dyslexia, dyscalculia, or some of the others. So that's kind of the components with that. So I'll turn it over to Representative Deweese to explain more.
Sure. Thanks, Nicole. I'm glad she did the explanation of the bill. I will tell you, when I was approached with this, it was some constituents, and obviously dyslexia is an issue. The Lord has blessed me with 2 children that fortunately do not struggle with dyslexia, but plenty of our friends do, and my wife, being in the schools, has seen it firsthand. And so when I was approached with it, I thought, what can I do to help? This is what I'm here for. This is the platform we've been given. What can I do to help? And so I took that opportunity to partner with Nicole and Dr. Wright, and especially the she's out here. Hold on one second. Especially the department of Robin Lamotis with the special ed department. She's been wonderful working through all this. Sorry, I got distracted there. Neighbor child walked over. Anyway, it has certainly been eye-opening for me, and working through all this with Senator Boyd, it has been wonderful. Yes, the training component was in there. It was taken out. We certainly understand why during this time, but also, so that y'all know, it's a testament to our teachers. We've had so many teachers calling, asking for this training. And we really hope that down the road we can get that back in there. But we do understand the timing of that. It is not right now with everything that's going on and the strain that's been put on our teachers. So, if we had a perfect bill, I say perfect bill, I don't know that there is a perfect bill. They always need some work done to them, but that would be in there, and we look forward to working on that in the future.
Great, thank you. We've had a question that's kind of a follow-up to that issue posted in the chat. So let's go ahead and go to that one. I think this is a follow-up, Senator Boyd, to some of your remarks about a child qualifying for an IEP. The question is, I thought that if the child was a specific number of standard deviations below the standard, that the district is required to provide an IEP, that they don't get to choose. Can you respond to that?
Yes, but there's confusion among our school districts on this, and there's great confusion across the state on this. And so that's one of the things that you're going to see training from the State Department of Education, increase their training on this, especially for special education directors, making sure that we've had, and I'll be candid, one of the reasons I was so interested in this is I had a neighbor child who had a very large deviation in that score, but they went to the school district with proper testing and all of that, and they said, we don't do IEPs for dyslexia. It was a great school district. And so we have heard that story repeatedly across the state. And so one of the things that we want to, and quite frankly, the word about this bill and some of the stories that have been out there, that's already prompting a change. I had a special education director that called me specifically because she was very unaware of some of the language in there that she needed to be looking at. So hopefully when we do this legislation, it'll bring additional awareness to that. And so what this language does is it codifies, basically it puts the federal law into state statute. So it makes sure that we are following what the federal law is requiring. And that's been a problem in some school districts across the state. And so hopefully with this law, we will make sure that not only now federal law, but now state law is being followed.
Great. Representative Deweese, do you want to follow up on that at all?
Well, I saw another question that came in kind of related to the one that I just answered. As far as the training component, I need to clear that up. We do have teachers that are trained in dyslexia. This bill did not train dyslexia therapists or any of that. This bill, the training component of that bill was for all teachers and administrators to be able to recognize dyslexia and then get them to the services. So I wanted to make sure that that was cleared up with that question that also came in.
Great. Okay, you saw that. The question was, how good is the law if teachers are not trained to provide the proper education or services? Right. So we do have teachers across the state who are trained, but not every district has teachers who are trained. So we hope that training will come. Okay, I'll move on to another question that has been emailed to us. It says the legislature has set aside funds every year to pay for scholarships for teachers to get a master's degree in dyslexia therapy, but they have not provided additional funding for school districts to hire the dyslexia therapists. Do you think the state should appropriate funds specifically for school districts to hire dyslexia therapists?
Back to the previous question that came in. Of course, we would love to be able to appropriate funding for everything, but there's, as we all know, there's only so much funding that can go around. As we look at it, this bill is helping us to recognize dyslexia and maybe reach for some sort of regional dyslexia therapist, getting them in every district. Yes, that's obviously the goal, but we have to take these first steps and get there. So that would be my answer is hopefully look at maybe a regional therapist.
And just to piggyback on what Representative Deweese said is, realistically right now, we don't have enough dyslexia therapists in this state to probably put one in every school district. So what we would like to see, and one of the things that Representative Deweese and I keep looking for in budgets, maybe that we could borrow from some places, is looking at if we could put Very similar to how we have literacy coaches across the state. If we could start out maybe doing some regional dyslexia coaches to fill in some gaps right there. But what we really want to see is training across the state, particularly for our classroom teachers, especially for the reading teachers, because with the number of children that have dyslexia, they're going to be in all of our classrooms. And so making sure that every reading teacher knows how to properly teach a child with dyslexia, we think is absolutely critical to improving our continuous, to improving our literacy rates across the state.
And this next question that's been posted in the chat kind of goes to that issue. It says, why isn't it a requirement to have a dyslexia program in our schools? Just imagine all the children who are falling through the cracks. Our school district has a qualified therapist and is not allowed to administer any therapy since she was hired as an interventionist.
I'm not able to speak to that specific situation. I can't, speak to that specific one. Look, we're in our second year of the legislature. We agree completely that we want to see these programs expanded and increased. And we are, as we are started looking at this issue, it's one of the things that when we started looking at it, it is a very, we need to take a very systemic and complex approach to doing this. So we're going to agree with many of your comments tonight on that we need to increase more resources in this area. This bill is a first step in this area. It is raising awareness, and we hope will, with the partnership and the Department of Ed is doing, we will hopefully increase some knowledge base and some awareness that we need more support in this area.
I'll answer that question like I answer questions in my my business life. Is I do not know the answer, but I am always willing to help find an answer. So if that question wants to come to us, we will certainly dig into that and try to get an answer back to whomever presented the question to us. Nancy, if you'll just let us know who that is, we'll be happy to find out the answer.
Thank you. And there was a follow-up to that. Someone else saying our school has a dyslexia therapist, but is not able to do therapy with a diagnosed child. It is a problem. So that's
Sure.
pretty much the same thing. The next question says, my sons were both dyslexic. Back then, our school district used trained volunteers to work with children. Can that be done now?
I think it'd be a great idea if we could get volunteers to help in the district. Obviously, we want to put therapists in every school. That's the ultimate goal. But I think we've got to be creative and figure this out. Again, the bill that we have presented here was to recognize dyslexia, and then all hands on deck. Let's figure it out. This is a problem that we need to address. And I think if COVID shows us anything, what we're doing right now, we've got to be creative in everything that we're doing.
Great, thank you.
And we've got some really great dyslexia programs in the state. We've got some really good models in this state that are, and the resources they're using are not, their costs are not extreme. So we're first step in this is making sure that we are following state and federal guidelines on this, and making sure that we're giving children the proper supports and the proper interventions. And we will hopefully be expanding on this for years to come.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have another question that's been emailed in. This is a long one. It says, like all of the MAEP, the special education component of MAEP is underfunded this year by more than $32 million. State special education dollars only pay for teacher units, the number of teacher units that each school district qualifies for based on child find. That means that the state is denying school districts funding for special education teacher slots that the district needs. Most districts use other MAEP funds to cover the costs, which shortchanges other things MAEP is supposed to cover. Do legislators know that they are underfunding special education, and what can we do about it?
Well, I want to first start out is, yes, we are very aware of this. And as a parent of a special needs child, I am certainly an advocate of doing this. But I also want to point out one other thing too that we forget in this issue. The federal government, when they passed IDEA, there was a passage of IDEA that they were going to fully fund special education. They have never, ever come even close to funding this. So contact your congressman, contact your senators. We need to see increased support from this from the federal level. Absolutely, and it is part of their responsibility too on this issue. And I know educational issues, sometimes we just think of state funding, but we need their support on this matter desperately with that. But I'll also say this, today is like an International Inclusion Day. And when I saw that question, I was like, yes, but we underfund all students, not just special education students. And so when I was looking at that question, it kind of hit me is don't just think of those children as silos that are different. We are underfunding all children. And so that was kind of that's my comment that I would kind of make back is don't just think them as separate and apart. Think them as part of, because first and foremost, as special education students are general education students.
Yes, that's a great point, and we've got to treat them all equally. I'm all with Nicole on that. And as we look at the MAEP funding, yes, we are underfunding. We're aware of that. Again, Nicole and I have been here now, I don't know what, 14 months. And we've seen all sorts of funds running around. I've told somebody the other day, I'm used to dealing with 10s and 20s, and now you're handing us millions and billions. So, we're aware. We want to do everything we can to get that funding up, and also the other needs across our state. So we've got to be cognizant of everything else. But yes, we are aware of it. And over our time here, I think another question later on is something, what do we like to do with future legislation and education? This funding is always one of them, is to try to figure out where those funds can come from and put it and invest in our children, invest in our future.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's see. Here's another question. The teacher training would be designed for reading teachers to recognize dyslexic tendencies so those children can be tested. There's a question mark at the end of that. Would there be funding allotted for this training, and who would provide the training?
This was a component of our bill, and this is where the special ed director, Rob Lamonis, really came into play. The Department of Education is willing to set up this training program and administer it. Cost, there was no cost to it. That was one thing that was great about this bill. We weren't asking for any additional funds. The Department of Education was not asking for any additional money. They were willing to set this training program up, and they were willing to administer it. So yes, it was for all teachers to be able to, not just reading teachers, but all to be able to recognize dyslexia tendencies and then get those children the services that they were entitled to and need.
It's set up kind of in training modules. And so if you're a reading teacher, you could really go through those training modules and reading teachers. If you're a math teacher, there would be components that you could pull down from and really train in your respective areas. So that's kind of the exciting thing about the training components that that they are looking at.
Okay. This is kind of a standards question. It says, is Common Core a requirement, or can our children use what works for them?
I don't know the answer to that. One interesting find that I did learn through all of this is dealing with Dr. Lamotis, is that the special ed children, a regular, I won't say a regular ed, a non-dyslexic student could learn to read the way a dyslexic student learns to read. I thought that was intriguing to look at the different ways of reading, and I don't know how Common Core plays into that, but it was very interesting, a point that I took from that working with her.
Common Core is actually, we did adopt Common Core, and then we changed to the Mississippi standards. But those are the standards. It's not a way of teaching. It just tells schools and districts and parents what a child is supposed to have learned by the end of each grade level, what they need to learn in English language arts by the end of kindergarten and first grade and second grade. And we do have state standards that our public schools are required to meet. So it's not if they're in public schools, it's not up to the student, it's up to, or the parent, it's up, the public schools have to meet those standards. Yes, it's the Mississippi College and Career Readiness Standards. And this person says it includes phonological awareness and phonics instruction. Okay, let's go to another question that was emailed in. This says school districts are required to screen for dyslexia, but they aren't required to cover diagnostic testing. Why not?
This is one of the reasons that this is so important, that schools recognize that this is a disability that can fall under IDEA. Because if a parent goes in and asks for, who has a child that they have strong suspect of having dyslexia, and they ask for an IEP evaluation with this, the school districts will convene an IEP team. At that point, there are very strong federal standards and guidelines that schools will follow in that process. And so as a part of that process, they will be evaluating the child's reading skills and looking at to see if they have dyslexia. Those are provided at no cost to the parent. It's called Free Appropriate Public Education. It's called FAPE. And so school districts are required under that to do some evaluation and testing of the child to see if they do have those reading issues that would, that do consist of dyslexia. So that's one of the reasons to make sure that we clarify this law in this process.
Thank you. Okay. This next question says, thank you for agreeing to answer our questions. Why should the state fund vouchers for students with dyslexia to attend private schools that don't provide dyslexia services?
That's back to the original comments here. This is our 14th month. That's something that we're aware of, that no, we don't really like it. And it's something that as we move along through here, this is an introductory bill to get something going. And this is the starting point. This is kind of the framework of what we would like to work on moving forward. It's something that was there when we got here, and we'll look at it as we move forward.
It's one of the things too, and we don't have, like, if they don't provide dyslexia services, our question too that we're asking them back is, are they providing accommodations? Are they giving extra time for testing? Are they doing anything extra on this matter? So we're trying to get to the bottom of it and get more information. If what those school districts are and what those schools are exactly doing right now. So we're in the process, and we're going to agree with you right now and say this was done before we got here. So we're hoping to find out more information on that.
Thank you. Okay, another question. It says, what steps should parents take when students diagnosed with dyslexia are not offered qualifying remediation, meaning proven remediation for dyslexia specifically, and given the appropriate time, for the appropriate time it was studied?
Okay, I want to jump in and ask if you really, I want parents to have this number to write down. It is 1-877-544-0408. That is the parent hotline number in the special education department at the Department of Education. And you should contact that number, and they will put you with a specialist who will help you get some resolve on your issues. And they will be able to kind of give you assistance and help on that.
Let me check this number. I'm going to put it in the chat if I have it right. Is it 1-877-544-0408?
Yes.
All right, that's in the chat, so y'all grab it from there. Great, thank you. Anything else on that one? Okay, this says students who have dyslexia could really benefit from smaller classes, as could most students, but school districts can't afford to hire more teachers because the MAEP is underfunded. I hear some legislators say that we can't afford to fully fund the MAEP at the same time that they propose huge tax cuts that would reduce the money available for services like public schools. Do they understand that what parents hear when legislators say that is that our children aren't a priority?
I'll take that one. First, I want to clarify. I agree. My kids, they would benefit from a smaller class. All children would benefit from a smaller class. We've addressed the MAEP thing, and I think we can all agree that sure we would love to see that fully funded. As for the tax cut, I know what we're all discussing here, and the big legislation that came out last week out of the House. Just to clarify, there's no money being cut from education. That big tax bill does not reduce funding in any way to education. The goal of that, in my opinion, is to grow the state and grow the economy, and hopefully produce more funds and use those funds in areas such as education. So I hear what you're saying. I really do. I understand that, but I do want to clarify that nowhere in there does it say we're going to take any money away from from education. So I do understand what it looks like. I certainly do, but that is certainly not the intentions.
I would just kind of remind everyone too that you remember 40% of our state's budget is devoted to K-12. And then we have, when you add universities and colleges in, it's just a little over 52%. I want more money. I want to put more money in education, but it is not because you are not valued and your children are not valued, but there are competing, there are competing interests with law enforcement, with roads. I was on the phone half the day today because there's resources lacking in the crime lab. But please know that there are lots of things being done that we are trying to pare down any excess in the budget. We've put new transparency efforts into place this year into looking at line items, trying to make sure that those line items are actually needed and are efficient and what they're supposed to go to. So again, 14 months into it, and we are trying to look for those ways that we can increase our support for education.
Thank you. Here's a question about the dyslexia scholarship that is funded with state funds. It says the dyslexia scholarship needs to be rewritten so that it can be used to pay for dyslexia therapy in kids, and kids should not have to be enrolled in a private school to get those services. The scholarship is inaccessible for many because they can't afford the private school. Is this something that is being considered? I have 2 children with dyslexia. We've used the scholarship in the past, but the expense to parents is still not within reach. I think this is getting to the fact that the schools can charge more than the scholarship pays for.
We're gonna be candid. As we got into this, and y'all know we had the session that really didn't end last year. So we started meeting actually before we were through last year's session. We started meeting on this particular issue, and this was something that we discovered and we were not aware of. I think we had assumed that when the child used the dyslexia scholarship that it paid for the large amount of it. This is something we're going to hopefully look at. We're going to see how the money's being used. I'm particularly, Representative Deweese too, is how efficacious are the programs that they're going to? What are the results that they're presenting? What's the best use of these funds that we're dedicating to this particular issue? Is it for training purposes? What are the best ways to use these dollars? And we can't tell you we are looking into this, but we can't tell you with certainty right now. We're asking a lot of questions and hopefully going to be provided back a lot of more answers on these particular issues. But I do think you have raised a very legitimate issue that we are asking the same questions on.
Yes, to follow up with Nicole, that did come up in our original meetings in the session that never ended. I guess it was back in early summer, late spring, early summer last year that this came up, and both of us were appalled learn of this and figure out what was going on. You know, again, this bill is step one. It's kind of the roadmap, and as we get started here, this is something that we'll certainly take a look at and dive down and dig deeper on as we move forward.
Great, thank you. Here's a question that says, is there a specific dyslexia screener required by all school districts? If not, is this something that is being discussed? The current screener being used in some school districts is not identifying these children, and or the teachers are trained on what to tell the parents when a child is flagged on the screener.
Can you go check the front door?
Do y'all have an answer for that? Do you know if they're
Yes, but what I would encourage, there's some screeners that are spelled out actually in the dyslexia law in the state, and I don't have copies of those code sections, but what I would use that same number at the parent hotline that I gave you, and that will put you in touch with, and that can answer those particular questions for you on what screeners should be used or whatever. I think most all of there's 4 different screeners. Is that right, Clay? I believe they presented to us. Most of the school districts are using one particular screener. If I remember this correctly, again, y'all, I'm having a senior moment. I think that was back in October that we were going through the screeners. But anyway, there's one particular screener that more of the school districts are using, but those are approved by the State Department of Education. School districts are trained, for our understanding, on what to tell parents when they are given that their child passed or did not pass a screener. That's been our understanding. Again, though, if y'all find out that there's vast differences on what parents are being told, let us know. We want to hear from you, and we want to know what you're seeing across the state.
Great, thank you. This question says, what if a school tests a struggling child and determines that the child is not dyslexic and the parent wants a second opinion?
Okay, IDEA has provisions for independent evaluation. And so again, I'm going to put you back to that number because there's some real specific things that IDEA does allow for on independent evaluation, and they will be able to walk you through all those provisions on independent evaluation.
Okay.
He's on a roll, Nancy. Keep her going.
Will the interventions be done by a dyslexia therapist?
I think, yeah, Clay, I'm gonna let you go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, as it pertains to this bill, I'm assuming that's the question here. One second. This bill was to recognize dyslexia, and then yes, get them to a dyslexia therapist. That's the ultimate goal here.
And the ultimate goal is that our teachers across the state will be so trained into how to work with kids in the general education classroom that they will receive support and expertise from these dyslexia therapists, but that they will be able to provide those interventions to those children in a very inclusive setting. And so we would love these classrooms to be able to be, friendly to children with dyslexia and other learning issues.
There were a couple of comments saying that they think the problem is that the teachers who are using the screeners don't have enough training to know what to tell parents, and that's respond appropriately. Then there's a question that says, our school has a dyslexia therapist doing intervention. It isn't enough to really help. 20 minutes, 3 days a week with 4 kids is not enough time. So it sounds like a staffing issue. If they would let her do her job, that would be amazing. That's what the question says.
Okay. And with that, I would, kind of ask that parent, that should be something, if your child, if the impact is severe enough that they qualify for an IEP, that needs to be addressed in that child's individual IEP meeting. If they qualify for an IEP on that. So that's something that I would tell the parent really to insist the school district evaluate that child for an IEP, and therefore then put a very it's an IEP is an individualized education program, and so make sure that that is individualized for that child.
Great. Representative Deweese, did you want to add
I'm
anything
good
to
with
that?
that.
You good? Okay. Is there some type of stipulation, possibly financial, that keeps some school districts from hiring dyslexia therapists or renaming them reading interventionists and not allowing them to perform dyslexia therapy? A lot of this seems to happen in districts.
Go ahead. I'm not qualified to answer that one.
I think that's the very reason this is a starting step that we see. I think your comment is actually correct. From the feedback that Representative Deweese and I got, he's going to be nice and not say it. I'm just going to go ahead and say that that is some of the feedback that we were getting, that maybe, but what at the core, one of the core problems of this is some of the school districts not understanding that this is a learning disability that is qualified for intervention under IDEA. And so that goes back to the legislation and why there's such a critical need for this legislation. When you start with that parameter that this is something that indeed does qualify, and that children do need to and be measured on and evaluated for their success on this issue, it puts it kind of in a different perspective. And so what we're hoping with this clarification, that we will see schools maybe put a re-emphasis on some of those interventions that they're doing right now and how they're being conducted, because it puts those protocols in place that you get with an IEP. I think that'll benefit, even if the child doesn't qualify for an IEP, I think it sets the tone that hopefully will benefit all children that have reading issues like this.
Okay, thank you. How do we get districts to pick curricula that meets those needs so they wouldn't necessarily need interventionists? If we would teach reading using the science of reading, we would catch these kiddos.
Well, I certainly think that's something that we need to get back with Dr. Wright and the special ed department on a question like that. Certainly not something that Nicole and I think are able to tackle at this moment, for sure.
I would definitely say I'm out of my comfort level answering that particular question. So it's a great question, but I think we're both, we're going to stay in our lane on this one, on that question.
Maybe we'll do another one of these and ask Robin Lamonis to come.
There you go.
Help us answer some questions. And then you all can come ask her questions. All right, well, I think you've already answered this, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it because it was emailed in. Why aren't there funds attached to this legislation that you all have proposed? Can we really hold our schools accountable without giving them funding?
I'll let Nicole expound on this, but that was one thing that was nice about this bill, is there was not a funding component to it. The Department of Education, as I mentioned earlier, was going to do these trainings and they were going to administer the trainings. And how do we hold them accountable for doing that? Nicole, if you want to answer that part of the question. So
yes, and so by this legislation, the way it's worded is IDEA holds districts very much accountable for following those procedures. So there's built-in mechanisms under that federal law that does this. Also, the accommodations that we're requiring the children be evaluated for in 504 is another piece of federal legislation. And there are mechanisms that hold them accountable under that. And there is some funding for children that do qualify for the IEP on that. We are in a pandemic year and it has affected our budgets. It's affected a number of things. And so when looking at this legislation, you said, okay, do we wait and do this, or do we start the steps that we can start that don't cost money? And with the Department of Ed stepping up to the plate, saying that they would offer training in this issue, and us making that clarification in the law, we felt like this was a good start to this. So no, but understand too, we are looking at ways that we can help look at additional funding that will make sure that we can, and there are some, one of the things too we wanted to see too, as these children, many of these children will qualify for IEPs. There's already a mechanism and a funding mechanism in place for school districts. And so we wanted to kind of, this will be a good opportunity for us to see as we transition many of these children to IEPs and 504s, what that looks like and what's needed in addition. So there's already kind of a system in place that we haven't really been channeling these children through. We've almost been creating an entire separate system for children with dyslexia. And so we have this mechanism in place. Let's get them in that. And we have teachers in place, many of them who can provide supports and services for these kids. So this is kind of a, again, this was, we talking about this with the department, this is a first step in kind of getting us headed in the right direction, we hope.
Also, one other thing on the accountability side of that, in the training component of this, there was a reporting mechanism from the districts back to the Department of Education. That's one reason we really wanted that training component in there is to hold the districts accountable to make sure that these teachers were receiving that training. With that gone, again, we understand why during the pandemic and whatnot, but that's something that that we would really like to see just from accountability perspective.
Excellent, thank you. Here's another question. Dyslexia doesn't go away, and a lot of kids are not identified at an early age. Why are the schools that provide dyslexia therapy only doing it through 6th grade? I've been dealing with this for almost a decade with my 2 children and have tons of questions.
Again, if we can get these children evaluated for IEPs, that goes through age 21. If they don't qualify for an IEP, but do qualify for 504, that extends not only beyond high school, but extends into college. And so those children will qualify for services, or will qualify for support through their college years. So again, this is why we need to gear them into making sure that we have a continuous system in place. And we don't really have this separate system that some of our school districts are doing where they stop providing that additional therapy at grade 6, because this should be something that extends throughout the learner's time in school.
Excellent, thank you. The pandemic has been very hard on students with learning differences like dyslexia, and it is going to take extra resources to help them get back up to speed. Will you support full funding of the MAEP so that school districts will have the resources they need to help our students recover?
Representative Deweese and I, look, we are huge advocates, but to say we would fully support it is like, we would be glad to, but it's not going to get before us for a vote on full support in this pandemic year. That's probably not going to happen with that. But what I do want to make sure that people know is that Mississippi would be divided among our school districts, but we will receive over $650 million that is being allocated out to our school districts to put many of those things in place that I think this question was referring to, that will put those supports in place that we can really help these students and all of our other students with this. So, and Representative Deweese and I supported legislation. We didn't make it through, but we had put some what we called trauma infused therapy that would make sure that happened, and we that legislation died, and so we really were trying to work on some additional matters that would put some supports in place for these children. But I'm very optimistic of the money that's being provided from the federal government that is going to be passed down through the schools, and what I'm hearing the Department of Education is putting into place, that we will be able to use those funds for some great remediation.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I know we've answered the MAEP question a couple of times throughout this. Yes, we we have a heart for the school districts and for public education. We want to fund it the best we possibly can. And, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I feel like we're doing all we can. And I hope we can continue to do more as we move forward and find additional funding to help with the MAEP funding as we move on.
What advice would the two of you give our folks on the call, our members, about, obviously the two of you understand these issues and have really looked into it, you understand it, you get it. What would you tell our members about ways to help other legislators understand all the implications of resources and how those resources are used?
I would say just make them aware of it. It's somebody in your district. Again, this for me, this came from a constituent in my district that came to me, dear friends of ours, with a child in need, and it's around us every day. I do not fully understand this. I'm learning this as I move forward this, and it's very exciting to learn and to help. We've been given this platform. All of our 122 representatives in the senators, we have been given a platform, and just go to your representative, go to your senator, let them know of the issues. There's plenty of issues that we don't know about. It doesn't fall in our realm of what we do. But as you dive into these things, you start learning them. But just please go to them and let them know what these issues are and how you feel about them. And there are resources, and yes, you do have to dig a little bit, but they're there for you. And we've been so fortunate to be given this platform, and it's not something that I take for granted, and want to be able to help in any way we can. So I would just say, find your representative, find your senator. Please let them know what the issues are to you.
I would echo what Representative Deweese said. This was, I think I've told Nancy before, this was my next door neighbor whose child started having these issues, and I knew of them, but me seeing that, being very close to that child, put them, at the forefront for me to want to deal with this immediately. Someone brought this up in the call with the Lieutenant Governor. He was very interested in us looking at this, issue because of that. So just keep pounding us if you think we're not paying attention on something. And that's the thing, is make sure, a lot of times there was an issue that came up yesterday that I was dealing with from our community, and everyone assumed that somebody knew about, something. And what we found out is no one knew it. And so they had assumed somebody else had called somebody and done that. And a simple phone call to a state agency got that problem resolved when, multiple people had just assumed that agency knew about it. So keep us informed and keep pounding us and stuff that you want us to really listen to.
That's great. Thank you. One more question, and then if anybody else has a question for the chat, we'll try to take that too. Then we'll wrap up pretty soon. So, are there other education issues that the two of you are interested in working on in terms of legislation in the future?
I'll go. This was a great start. This was something that I was going to say in the last little segment there. It's kind of like when you buy a new car. All of a sudden, you notice that everybody else has that same car on the road. When you start finding these issues, more and more people come to you that are suffering from this as well, and we're here to help. As we move forward, again, as I started, my wife has a master's in special education. It's something that's near and dear to her heart, and I want to work through some of those issues with her and see what we can do to help special education in the time that I'm given in the legislature.
Yeah, I'll just give a few because it's taken me I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so honored to be here, but I don't take it for granted either. And but one of the things, I'll just give you a couple of issues. I would love to see pre-K expanded across the state. I think it is absolutely critical. And so I would love to see an expansion of our pre-K program across the state. I also would like to visit how teachers are compensated, look at insurance, retirement, how we structure pay, so that we can be more competitive and we can entice more teachers into the profession, and hopefully keep some of the ones from leaving the profession that maybe have a little bit of burnout. I also would love to see some expansion on our dual credit enrollment opportunities for students at the high school level. I would love to see that. And I do have a heart and a passion for children with disabilities, and I would like to see us look at how we can give more vocational educational opportunities to those students. I'm really looking at long-term employment, and that's going to take some coordination with the Department of Rehab Services, but hopefully something that we can start beginning the conversations on. Some other states may be doing a little bit better job in that than we are, and I feel like that's an area that we can see some great improvement. So I'll stop in that. I won't go to
That's terrific. That's terrific. Wow, this has been a great hour. I have learned a lot, and I'm so grateful for you all coming. I know that it was a sacrifice of your time, and we appreciate your being here. And I think we've all learned a lot. And I want to invite everybody to unmute and give our speakers a round of applause for a wonderful session. Thank you so much. That was great.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all for listening.
Thank y'all for having us.
Okay, and I stuck the number, the MDE number that Senator Boyd gave us back in the chat. So write that down. It's a great resource for you all to have. To everybody else on the call, Representative Deweese offered to get back to you with issues if there were some issues that you didn't have answered. If you all will shoot me an email and let me know if there are questions that you still have, I'll make sure to get that to our speakers, so that they will have that information and they can communicate with you about that.
Right.
So thank you to everyone. We have next week is our final Real Talk of this series, and we'll have the vice chairs of our education committees, Representative Kent McCarty and Senator David Blunt, will be joining us for that next Thursday at 5:30. So join us then. If you've registered, you're good to go. It's the same. You get the same registration link, so you're good. So thanks, everybody. Thank you again, Senator Boyd, Representative Deweese. We're so grateful for your time. We hope you'll come back and join us again.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Everybody have a great night.